Every other speaker that has come up since then started their presentation with story. There's a reason for that, so that's what we're going to talk about. I actually just really, really deeply believe that whatever kind of coach or whatever kind of entrepreneur or whatever kind of movement you're here to start, your number one asset is your story. It was your story, 50,000 years ago when we were still doing whatever we were doing then. It's your number one asset now. It's going to be your number one asset in 50,000 more years. It's one of those things in business that's never going to change. I like that because I want to stay in business, right? I don't do the trends and the fads because then they're gone and then I missed out on something and I spent all my time there, right? I like to look for what is universally applicable, what's going to work in every channel, on every platform, in every trend, in every year, in every country. So the way that I discovered this is I was a launch manager and someone asked me, hey, you're managing the launch, do you want to do the Facebook ads as well? And I was like, okay, I don't even know how to do that. And I just started writing ads and they started going viral and I had no training. So it was like, in 12 weeks, we generated $2.5 million. And I was like, well, that's a pretty happy accident. Nobody was pissed about that. So I started to reverse engineer, why did that work? And I talked to every single woman who bought the program during that launch. And every single one of them said, I didn't even care what you were selling. I saw myself in that story. I want to be a part of that story. So after that, even though I could teach Facebook ads, I could teach copywriting, I was like, I'm only teaching story, and that's all I'm doing. And since I transitioned my business into that, there's a 100% success rate. I've never seen somebody tell more stories and make less money or have less impact or less freedom or whatever it is that you're trying to create. So in case that doesn't convince you, you can just read a couple of these slides about what other people have to say about stories. So this is really powerful to me because instead of like we're all in information overload every single day, we don't want something new. We want to remember something we already know. The greatest copywriters don't try to break down your beliefs and convince you of something you don't already believe in. They try to remind you of what you already know so that you're all in agreement so that you buy. That's kind of how this works. So here's another. This guy does the story work for Google, Facebook, NASA, LinkedIn, pretty much every corporate giant. He's writing their stories. And I don't need to tell you who that is, I don't think. So if your marketing actually reflected the way that humans have been communicating in their DNA for millions and millions of years, don't you think that would be more magnetic than just oh, I have this thing, you should do it, which is fine too, especially just do something. I'm a big fan of just doing something, but if you know that telling stories is going to work, then it's definitely the way to go. If you can start to, and I'm going to teach you a formula. It's not really a formula, but people like that word, so I use it. It's kind of more like a form. If you use this, your marketing campaigns end up more like marketing with sort of a Hollywood screenwriting twist to it, and then now you have people's attention. I mean, why do people go watch Star Wars when they already saw it? It's the same thing over and over. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the form that they're using in film, and that every culture has been using since beginningless time to share information, knowledge, connection, and emotions and all that stuff. Oh wait, I didn't remember that this was here. So yeah, the average person ignores 2,000 marketing messages daily. Nobody really ignores a good story though, do they? If you're telling somebody, even if you're all in love with your boyfriend and then he starts talking to you in the middle of a show, doesn't that irritate you a little bit? It's not right now, I'm watching this story. We're hardwired to pay attention to story. We don't buy a product or a service, we buy a story. And you should be the one telling the story about your product or service, not everybody else. Story cuts through the noise. And if you can find a piece of viral content online that didn't have a story, I will be shocked. Okay, so the way that I do this, I walk through the first 4 phases of the hero's journey. There's there's 12 phases, and it's pretty much in every story in the world and all the world literature and all the movies and everything like that. But the way that I do it in marketing specifically, it addresses 2 human needs. There is a form of story called origin story, and it's like, who are you as a person or a brand? Why are you awesome? What's human about you? This is a really important story to tell. However, you wouldn't want to tell it every time you turned on the camera, every time you wrote a piece of copy. People would be bored. We have a need for variety. We have a need for change. We can't see the same thing all the time and stay with it. But we also need consistency in order to trust. So creating your content or framing your campaigns in the following way, it takes care of these 2 things. And it becomes very important when you start to share, as your audience builds and as you speak to more people, it becomes really important that you can keep these things in mind. I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly because I want you to be able to ask questions. I know it's a lot of information, and I'm asking you to think about marketing a lot differently than probably you've ever thought about it before. So I'm going to move through it quick so that you can ask questions about how you would implement it. So these are the first 4 phases. This is something that is actually, if you look at a Hollywood script, these are timed. The first phase is going to be the first 15 minutes of a movie, and then it just goes on and on. It's not always. Really, really good movies can deviate, but this is the standard form. So the ordinary world is the first phase. What is important to me about this before you go to write your stories is that you sit down and you think about, and you can do this now, a 24-hour day, and I want a Monday, not a Saturday, in your ideal client's life. I want to know everything that they're thinking, everything that they're feeling, and everything that they're doing. I want you to know if your clients wake up to an alarm or not. Do they sleep until they feel like it, or do they wake up at 6? What do they think when they wake up? What do they eat? Do they get in the shower before they eat? Do they go to the gym? Do they go to a job? Do they work from home? What do they do during the day? Do they go to yoga, or do they think like, I have this yoga studio membership and I never go, I should go, but I'm going to drink wine instead? Like, I want you to know your people that well. If you know them that well, you can have multiple 7-figure business, like no problem, right? This is where, to me, other people have other ideas and that's fine. But to me, this is where the money is in a campaign, really deeply, deeply knowing your people. And so the ordinary world, it can look pretty good. However, the soul is not satisfied with it. So the soul is going to come in and start shaking things up a little bit. And that is phase 2. So I am more interested. So in film, they're going to talk about this a little bit differently. What I am interested in is what transformation is your ideal client's soul demanding, because that's where your stories need to meet them. So maybe everything is pretty good, but they're actually meant to be this huge leader, and they're just kind of hanging out in their pajamas, and they have this little business and it's going well, but they're actually meant to like change the world in some big way. If that's the truth for them, their spirit is not going to allow them to just have this 6-figure business and just kind of hang out at home. Things are going to start happening in their life that's going to pull them out of it, just like why all of you are here at this event, right? Something is pulling you beyond what is comfortable in phase 1. So you need to understand what core emotion and what core transformation your people are coming to you for. If you can understand that, you can create endless content and endless stories, and people will be like magnetized to you and they won't even know why. So the third is what's called refusal of the call. I like to give the example of Braveheart. William Wallace, he was destined to fight the British. And when he was first asked to do that, he said no. Well, that was his refusal of his calling, and so then something in life had to happen. His wife had to die, and now he's like pissed. He's like, okay, I'm going to fight these people. And the movie was a lie. He only won a little battle. He didn't win the whole war. However, he still did win a battle, and that was his destiny. So I researched it. I was like, this is amazing. And then I'm like, oh, no, it was a lie. I got really upset about that. So in sales, people are going to talk about objections. Now, if you use the word objection, you could have this misconception that they're objecting to you, and then you could take that personally. That's going to be really bad for your sales calls. I believe that there's only 2 types of people. There's people who want what you have. There's people who don't want what you have. Don't talk to the people who don't want what you have, right? Talk to the people who do. And if they're objecting, their objection is about objecting to their purpose and their own transformation, not anything about you or your offer. So that changes everything for a lot of people when they start to look at it that way, and you can start to tell stories about those things too. And then phase 4 is meet the mentor. In the movies, it's often like a little weird little wizard, and they go off into a little pocket and they do like their Jedi training. But in marketing, it's just answering a couple of basic questions. I didn't write them all down, but the most important one is, what do they need to believe about you? They need to like you. They need to trust you. They probably need to believe that you're authentic and that you've done the things and you've had the experiences that you're saying that you're going to help them with. Another thing they like to know usually is that other people have had success, following you as a leader, following you as a mentor. That's an important thing for most people. So I can spend 4 hours with somebody on this, but you guys are getting like the cliff notes. So after you go through these, you start to, how I have my clients do this is like, okay, that's your client hero journey. That's your client's hero's journey. Most story marketers will talk about your hero's journey. And I don't really believe in that. I will tell my client's story through my experience, but I'm thinking about them first. I'm using my personal details to meet them where they're at, not just to be like, guess what happened at the mall yesterday and I was doing this. No, that's not the kind of stories that I'm talking about. That can actually be repelling. But if you take the time to think about all of these things, and then you're like, oh, my people are stuck in this way, they really want to be doing this, and here's what's going to happen for them, here's what they really want. Now I scan my little database and I'm like, where are the stories in my life or in other people's lives that I know that matches that experience? And that is empathy. And so that's what I call digital empathy. And so I have people come up with a movie title now that we know what their transformational journey is, and it would probably make a little more sense if we had time to go through and give an example, but you'll be able to do it, so I'm not worried about it. Then you give a title. So for me, it's your vision is bigger than your fear. I teach a marketing strategy, and 99% of what I do is remind my clients that they need to step into their power and reconnect with their why and their vision. That's 99% of what I do, and then the strategy falls into place. So I tell a lot of stories about that. And then I think that if you're new at this process, then transformation from blank to blank is a really good way to frame this. So where are people when they get to you? Where are they when they leave? If you don't want to get into all everything, statements like number 1, number 2 is really, really good. So does anyone just want to share, if they were to name their client or customer hero's journey in a from blank to blank statement, what that would be? Take both of them, that'll be good.
It's probably not exactly right. I'm thinking about from wounded little gal to fierce female leader.
Awesome.
Okay.
So now you have content forever until you switch the person, until you switch audiences or clients. You can use that statement. Every time you create content, you're kind of asking yourself, am I in that lane or am I not in that lane? Because the more, it goes back to what I said about hitting the tree with a small axe in the same place. It's like if you start to share different stories about that journey, or different, like sometimes it's phase 1, sometimes it's phase 3. It's like almost showing a film, just like snapshots of a film, and they're like, I don't know who this is, but this is like my life, and you're in my head, and I'm scared right now, but who are you? And I want to give you money. So that's what starts to happen.
So mine would be from lover of fast fashion to global supporter of women in water.
Awesome. It's great. Yeah, and there's such an opportunity there. I'm glad you said that, because there's such an amazing opportunity there with visual storytelling. You don't have to always write copy to tell a great story. There's such a powerful opportunity with photos with that too, of all the places that you've been. So, if you're more into visual, I'm not, as you can see, I don't have any pictures on my slides, but if you're more visual, then you can tell amazing stories with that. So how do I break this down into blog posts, emails, videos, webinars, all that kind of stuff? Oops. So I call this micro content. Again, I distinguish this from what I shared earlier as being the origin story, which you probably want to use in the beginning of a webinar, or if you're speaking from stage, you're going to tell the same story over and over again. Even Brendan Burchard does that. But if you want to write blog posts or make videos or, do a Facebook Live, you can't do that. You need to talk about something different. So from number 1 and from number 2, I extract I start thinking, okay, wounded healer, empowered entrepreneur, what happened along the way? What were the pivotal moments for me? What were the things that were interesting? What provided the most transformation that would emotionally strike somebody? And now I have 6 stories. It took me 30 seconds to do that. So these are stories where now I'm 100% sure that this story is going to land with my ideal client. And not only is it going to land with them, it's going to strike them right in the place where they're kind of dancing around I know I want this growth, but I'm not really sure if I want this growth. But wait a minute, who are you? You stop them in their tracks. And so these are some things that I think that, some of you may, have similar stories like this, some of you may not. The one thing I want to say is that a lot of things that you think aren't important, aren't significant in your life. Those are the things you need to be sharing. And that's why having a process to go through like this is so, so helpful, because all of my clients miss what's right in front of their nose in terms of interesting stories. They're like, oh, that wasn't interesting. I'm like, you just told me you drank 4 Red Bulls and drove 4 countries over and then ran a marathon and won it, and that's not interesting. And she's like, not really. so we always miss the things that are just right. I was like, that's very interesting, actually. She's like, I don't know. So we always think that we're not, we tend to, and especially women tend to, I don't see this with men as much. Women tend to undermine their own experiences. Now you have a map, so you can't do that anymore. Because it's not about you. Like we were saying in the panel, it's not about you, it's about them. Your stories are not about you, they're a service. They're a service because there's people out there that are really hurting right now that will actually transform if they hear your story. And I'm serious about that. That's really, really true. So let's see, what else? Okay, so cool. That's it. I know it's a lot. It's like $3 or $4 million worth of testing and generating money, and also many, many years of just refining the process. That's the shortest way, that's the most bite-sized way I can give it to you. So in the 11 minutes remaining, I would love for you to try to apply some of this stuff, or just any general questions that you have.
Hi.
Hi.
So as a photographer, I'm always giving some kind of, background story or what the transformation was for my clients. Do you have any suggestions if there's other ways of approaching it, or I don't always know if I should tell the transformation of the client story along with the photos. Does that make sense?
Are the photos of them?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's fine. That's very origin story-ish, like we were talking about earlier. And I feel like you do need to have an identifiable origin story that people think of you. That's why a lot of those, really well-paid coaches, you've heard Tony Robbins and Brendan Burchard tell the same story a million times. You start to associate them with that. That's very important. This is more for, if you were going to start to showcase their work on social media, you can't just tell that story every day, right? You have to start to take little snapshots of the story and be able to make that interesting, and to also be able to make that have an entire story arc in just a little tiny piece of content. Yeah.
This is just a kind of a clarity question on, because there's a lot of telling your story is what these hurting people need to hear. But then there was also but you're only accessing the parts of your story that are helpful in the context of what you went through before. So I think I'm just having trouble kind of discerning where the line is. Mm-hmm.
So I just gave you a process to reverse engineer story from where your client is at to where they really, really, really want to be. I find a lot of other story that I see online to be irrelevant in terms of it's not, your story has to drive action. It can't just be vulnerable. It can't just be oh, I really relate to you, but now I'm not going to buy anything, right? So if you actually want them to get the transformation, and that's why I say like people are hurting and they need your story, but we also have to make sure that they're going to take action around it. So does that help clarify? You can do whatever you want. Like you could actually just not listen to any of this and like, I don't know, I would still encourage you to share stories as a way to help people heal and transform and as a way to sell. Absolutely. This is one approach. And there's no black or white about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm just still chewing.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So I might have just called myself out on this, but I'll ask you
Cool.
anyway. So I was thinking about the new demographic that I'm going to start to be working with, which is people who are already successful, maybe already multi six-figure coach, for example, but going through this phase of realizing like, okay, the money that I've been making isn't enough. There's actually something that's out of alignment with what I'm creating. And so I guess where the thing that I want to call myself out on and get your feedback on is just somehow I was thinking that like, that's not enough because it's not, there is pain in it, but it's not the pain of like, it's like, it's this kind of funny pain, which is actually a place that I'm in right now in my own business where I'm like, I kind of have everything. I can buy whatever I want. I have this kick-ass place, blah, 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 but something's missing. Something's not enough. And I think that I was just like getting cynical in my head around the like, oh, well, that's first world problems and it's not that inspiring or... So I think that's the thing I'm kind of chewing on right now is, okay, so what is the story from this to that? It's like from having everything and having that not be enough to something else, which I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, you're really telling the story of empty success syndrome, and I hear you.
Yes,
the
I
pain,
like that. Yeah.
The pain is not painful when you're like living in Encinitas and you have this ocean view and you have money and savings and investments, and it's like, buy it. The hero's journey, it's not about the external world, really. It's really about like the soul. So if Oprah had stayed at like $500,000, she would have gotten in car wrecks. She would have like, you know, had all sorts of fucked up stuff happen because that's not where she was supposed to be. That's going to be painful. So you're going to be speaking to a smaller demographic, and they're going to need a lot of repetition because at a certain point in time, they are going to think, yeah, whatever, but things are going to get worse for them. And if they've seen you share a story 5 or 7 times, when they start to finally acknowledge that pain, they're going to be like, I need to talk to you. And I would like take that process, because you have access to a lot of these people. I would take that process and fill in the blanks for phase 1 through 4 with like 3 of them. And just like, hey, what does your everyday life look like? Like, what's calling you forward? Why are you not doing it? What do you want things to look like? And get that information from them. And you will, if you even do that with 3 people, you'll see patterns. And then you'll know where the real actionable pain is, and you'll be able to find that too.
I love that. Thank you.
There's actionable pain in every story. No.
Oh, my mic's
Is
on.
it okay to make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm the person who never wanted to make money, who didn't want to leave government for 20 years because I was making a difference from outer space. And one of the things that I did, and this is, I think it might be relevant to your question, and some of your clients, is when I looked to have a business, I didn't really want a business. I didn't want to make money. And that's the worst thing to say to all of you, because all of you need to make money. So I don't want you to think that my story is yours. But I actually found a reason to make money. The reason to make money is to help the world. And one of the organizations that you can look into is called B Corp. And if you look into it, it's called Benefit Corporations. You can do an evaluation online of your own corporation and see where you can make a difference in either the environment by having environmental policies for your employees, or for your, they even have virtual examples, by your board, the kind of policies that you make, having 50% women on your board, having visible minorities on your board, taking action and actually calling this out, by how you treat your employees and giving them shares. So if you don't know where to start, my first suggestion, and I learned it this year because I wanted to make a difference and I didn't know where to start. Go look at the B Corp assessment. And it is 200 questions that ask you everything from your mission statement to your vision statement. And every 2 years they check to see if you still get the same score. And even if you get a low score, they give you something for improvement. So again, it's a worldwide standard, and it's something that you could ask yourself questions with. You know, am I giving enough money back to the community? Am I doing something, you know, we're giving 20% back to the community, so I'm in a very high rate of community participation. But I'm also a really small company that has an environmental policy. It's as simple as that. I have a policy about which supplies to buy when you're working from home. But I shouldn't, because I'm one person. But I still wrote it. So these are the things that you can start to do to move into that space. And they will tell you what you're not doing right and where you can align. And then they have awards. And the people in these kinds of businesses, they're social enterprises, they want to share. They don't only, like here, because we're all women and we're all very, very connected and we believe in the good, that's good. But these people are men and women who want to share. You know, and Ben & Jerry's is a member and Patagonia is a member, and they get together and they talk about how can we move this forward? How can we move forward the UN Sustainable Development Goals? So I throw that out there for everyone who's interested in seeing how they can make a difference but still just work in their business. See if it applies or if it's something that's interesting to you.
Thank you. I think we probably have time for one more question.
Yeah, I'm going to ask if someone hasn't actually asked a question before. Now, the reason is because there's so many people in this room who would love to ask a question, but they're not brave enough to put up their hands. Anyone who hasn't asked a question want to get some time?
Cool.
I have a question about, stories. So I teach Spanish online. So I don't know if I should share stories about the language or about me. Like, hi, I'm your teacher.
What is your client or your ideal client struggling with? Why do they want to learn Spanish?
They are professionals, like after college. They graduates. So it's technically they're in the job, so they do this like after work.
But why do they want to do it?
Because they want to add a new skill to their resume, or they want to switch jobs, maybe a translator or interpreter.
So there's a couple ways to approach that, and not knowing, like, I would ask you so many more questions to really get the right story for you, but just in the time frame that we have, if they're already shopping around for Spanish classes, a lot of times what you can do is just share your origin story so that they like you and they relate to you, so that when they see the other Spanish, companies out there and they don't share a story at all, they're going to pick you because they're going to have that emotional context. However, if you wanted to be more refined and go deeper with it, where you would really go is like, where are they struggling? What are their objections to buying? And using this process to find times in your life where you had those same struggles, so that there's an empathy and there's a resonance. But it wouldn't in a product with a really clear outcome and a really clear benefit, an origin story is often enough. It's in the coaching world where a lot of times the transformation is less tangible, where you really need to go a little bit deeper. Does that make sense? Okay.
I guess I will talk to you later.
Is that it? Yeah, probably no more questions. Yeah. Okay, cool. Are we done?
Do you want to wrap up with anything?
I really think you should tell stories. That's it. Thanks.
Awesome.